Hey Donovan. So here's the deal. I'm not the kind of guy who believes in the boogeyman or anything, but something happened a few years back that I can't shake. I figured your channel is the place to share it without people thinking I'm nuts. I used to work nights in a warehouse in a not-so-great part of Akron, Ohio. The warehouse was this massive, old building, and right behind it was a block of equally ancient apartments. The whole area had a vibe, like it had seen better days, you know. One night, I'm on my lunch break, and it's a real nice night, so I head out back to catch some fresh air. I'm just scrolling through my phone when I hear this weird scuffling sound. I look up, and there's this shadowy figure moving around behind the apartment building. Now, I've seen raccoons and stuff back there before, but this was different. It was bigger and moved weird, like jerky and kind of hunched over. My first thought was maybe it's some druggie, so I yell out, "Hey, you alright?" This thing stops dead in its tracks, and I swear my heart almost stopped too. It turns around and isn't human. It's like this tall, lanky thing, covered in what looks like fur or rags. I couldn't tell. But its eyes, man, they were this glowing yellow, and it had these long, bony fingers. When it turned to face me, I got a better look at it. This thing was tall. I'm talking like 7 feet, but it was really skinny, like it hadn't eaten in weeks. Its skin looked kind of grayish, and it was covered in patches of this mangy dark fur. But the face, man, that's what got me. It had this long snout, kind of like a dog, but the mouth was all wrong. It was too wide, and it had these jagged, sharp teeth sticking out. And the smell that came from it was like rotten meat and wet dog. It was so strong I could taste it. The eyes were the worst part. They were this glowing yellow, but not like a regular animal in the headlights. They were almost like they were lit up from inside, and they were intelligent. I know that sounds crazy, but it was like it was sizing me up, thinking things through. The hands, or I guess you could call them claws, were long and bony with these wicked-looking talons at the end. It held them out in front of it, kind of like how a praying mantis does. When it screeched, I saw that its throat had these weird ridges, and it moved like there was something wriggling under the skin. The sound was so loud and piercing that I felt it vibrating through my whole body. I'm frozen, and we're just staring at each other. Then this thing lets out this god-awful screech. I'm talking like a banshee wail mixed with nails on a chalkboard. I don't know how my legs move, but next thing I know, I'm back inside the warehouse, slamming the door behind me. I tell my buddy, Mike, who's working with me, and he's like, "You saw it too." Turns out he'd seen the same thing a few weeks back, but didn't say anything because he thought people would think he was losing it. We didn't go back outside for the rest of the night, and you can bet I requested a shift change the next day. I still think about that night a lot. I wonder what it was and where it came from. I've looked into local legends and cryptids, but I haven't found anything that really matches what I saw. After I bolted back inside the warehouse, I remember looking out through one of the small windows next to the door. I saw it turn and scramble up the side of the apartment building, like it was both crawling and climbing at the same time. It disappeared over the roof, and that was the last I saw of it. I know this sounds like something out of a horror movie, but I swear on everything that it's true. I don't know what that thing was, and part of me is glad I never found out. But another part of me can't help but be curious, you know? Anyway, that's my story. Maybe someone out there's seen something similar. Who knows what's lurking in the shadows, right? Thanks for letting me share this, Donovan. It feels good to get it out there, even if I never got the answers I was looking for. As a veterinarian who spent nearly a decade working in both urban and rural settings across Montana, I've seen my fair share of animals, both common and rare, domesticated and wild. This account isn't about a run-of-the-mill critter I've encountered during my practice or weekend hikes, though. I hesitate to call it an animal because, in all my years of study and field experience, I have yet to find a rational explanation for what I saw that night. Let me set the scene for you. I was driving home late from the clinic in Great Falls, a small city surrounded by sprawling fields, hilly terrain, and dense patches of forests. It had been an unusually long day. A farming accident had resulted in several injured animals, and I was the on-call vet. I was driving a winding 2-lane road flanked by miles of open land and patches of forest that form a jagged horizon against the starlit sky. It was a clear autumn night in October of 2016. A bit chilly, but not uncommon for Montana around this time of year. Driving on that empty road, the only sound I could hear was the hum of my car's engine and the occasional crackle from the AM radio. The beam from my headlights was the only source of light, creating an island of visibility in an ocean of darkness. But in that bubble of light, my normal, routine drive was interrupted by something entirely out of the ordinary. Suddenly, a figure dashed across the road, causing me to slam on the brakes. My car skidded to a halt just a few feet away from the creature. My heart pounded in my chest as I squinted through the windshield, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It was roughly 7 feet tall, hunched over, making its actual height seem taller. It was covered in a coarse coat of dark hair, brown or perhaps black, but it was hard to tell under the stark, contrasting illumination of my headlights. It was unmistakably bipedal and bore a vaguely humanoid shape, but was bulkier, more muscular. Its arms were long, almost disproportionate, ending with what looked like claws or sharp-tipped fingers. I couldn't make out its face very well. It was turned away from the light, but I could see pointed ears sticking out from the massive hair. What struck me the most were its eyes, reflecting a chilling yellow glow, a common trait among many nocturnal animals. But these eyes held an uncanny sense of intelligence, almost human-like. It stood frozen for a moment, our gazes locked. Then, with a swift and powerful leap, it disappeared into the dense forest beyond the road. It all happened within a matter of seconds, but the image was seared into my memory. I was left sitting there, my heart pounding in my chest, my hands shaking slightly on the steering wheel. My rational mind was scrambling to identify the creature, to relate it to something known, something familiar but came up empty. When I finally pulled myself together, I slowly accelerated, eyes scanning the road and the surrounding area, half expecting the creature to reappear. But there was nothing except the quiet rustling of the night wind and the usual night sounds. Once I was home, I tried to make sense of what happened. I considered reporting it, but then what was I supposed to say? That I saw an unidentified creature that defied categorization. I didn't want to be ridiculed or brushed off as just another vet who'd had a long day. So I kept the experience to myself, besides sharing it with a few close friends and family members who were as baffled as I was. There were no other reported sightings of such a creature, and nothing turned up during my sporadic and rather covert inspections of the area. Over time, I was left with a gnawing uncertainty and a mystery that seemed destined to remain unsolved. That encounter challenged my view of the natural world. There was an unease, a lingering sense of fear, yes, but also curiosity. I found myself revisiting that night, replaying that sighting in my mind, wondering what it could be, where it came from, and why it crossed my path. But even years later, I still don't have any answers. Just an experience that serves as a stark reminder of the inexplicable and unknown elements that lie beyond our understanding. I've been working here in Yellowstone for about 5 years now, and I absolutely love it. The scenery is breathtaking, the wildlife incredible, and the people are generally pretty friendly. But there is one thing that I have not told anybody about my job: the occult activity that goes on in the park. I'm not sure if it's because Yellowstone is built on top of what I believe to be an active volcano, or what, but there seems to be a higher concentration of demonic activity here than anywhere else I've ever been. Trust me, I've seen some crazy stuff in my line of work. In fact, one of the more memorable experiences I had was when I was called out to investigate a disturbance near one of the thermal springs. When I got there, I found a group of people surrounding a large metal cylinder. It was roughly 6 feet tall and 3 feet in diameter, and was glowing with this eerie green light. I understand this sounds like something from an X-Files episode, but it's what I have to tell you. The people around it were chanting and waving their arm around like crazy, most of them completely naked. I immediately knew that this was some kind of strange ritual. As I stepped in to try to stop it, they turned feral on me. They were screaming and cursing, trying to jump on me, bite me, and attack me. In fact, one of them almost did. Fortunately, I was able to subdue this individual fairly easily, and after calling for backup, I had assistance within minutes. There were several of us on the scene, able to handle the situation. It appeared that all of them were not in their right minds, if you know what I mean. I'm not sure what the cylinder was used for, but it was confiscated, taken in, and apparently analyzed. I was told that the military took over on that one, so I don't have any update on the cylinder, why it was glowing, or what it was used for. That's just my speculation, of course, going by what I had experienced. I can only imagine what would have happened if we had not stepped in. I remember that we had some immediate personnel changes during that investigation. Within days, some of our staff just disappeared and we had new people. We were told not to question any changes and just do our job. Now, I've seen other things too, things that I can't even begin to describe. But one thing that I do know is that Yellowstone is a hotbed for strange activity and it's only getting worse. I don't claim to know what the future holds, but I do know that we need to be vigilant. We need to be on the lookout for anything and everything that seems out of place. If we're not, who knows what might happen next? My name is Mark Thompson, and I've been working as a research assistant at a company based on the outskirts of London for the past 5 years. The facility primarily focuses on chemical research, and I've spent countless late nights working alone in the laboratory. It was on one of these nights that I had an encounter that I still struggle to comprehend. It was April 16, 2022, around 2 a.m. The lab was bathed in a dim, flickering fluorescent light that always created eerie shadows along the walls. The atmosphere was heavy with the scent of chemicals and the hum of the ventilation system. I was alone, as usual, engrossed in my work, trying to meet an approaching deadline. As the hours ticked by, my concentration began to wane. I rubbed my eyes and stretched my cramped muscles. I needed a break. So I decided to step outside into the chilly night air to clear my mind. The small courtyard adjacent to the laboratory was surrounded by a dense forest, creating an additional illusion of isolation. As I stepped outside, the cool breeze immediately sending shivers down my spine. The moon, partially hidden behind thick clouds, cast an eerie glow upon the surroundings. It was then that I noticed an unusual rustling sound emanating from the nearby bushes. My curiosity became heightened, and I walked toward the source of the noise, cautiously. As I approached the bushes, the rustling grew louder, accompanied by an occasional low growl. My heart began to race, and I could feel beads of sweat forming on my forehead. I hesitated for a moment, contemplating whether to proceed or retreat to the safety of the laboratory. My scientific curiosity eventually won over my instincts, and I pushed through the foliage. The sight that greeted my eyes was, to put it in one word, unbelievable. It was a creature that I am sure was not any known species. It stood at least 6 feet tall, with a muscular build that was covered in coarse, matted fur. Its face was elongated, resembling a cross between a wolf and a reptile. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly intensity, the irises a piercing shade of yellow. Sharp, serrated teeth lined its snout. I watched as the creature prowled around the courtyard. It moved with an unnatural grace, its movements fluid and silent. Its limbs were long and powerful, terminating in claws that could tear through flesh effortlessly. I could feel its predatory gaze scanning the area, as if searching for something or someone. Time seemed to stand still as I remained hidden, observing the creature from the safety of the bushes. Fear rushed through me, but curiosity kept me rooted in place. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to flee, but I couldn't tear my gaze away from this being. After what felt like an eternity, the creature abruptly turned its head, locking its glowing eyes directly on mine. A jolt of terror shot through me, paralyzing my body. We stared at each other, our gazes locked. Its piercing yellow eyes seemed to bore into me. I knew instantly that this creature was revealing to me a depth of ancient wisdom and unspoken secrets. With a sudden swiftness, the creature turned and vanished into the darkness of the forest. The rustling of leaves and the crunching of twigs soon faded away, leaving only the night's oppressive silence in its wake. I stood there trembling, unable to process the magnitude of what I had just witnessed. Once the initial shock subsided, a whirlwind of thoughts consumed my mind. I questioned the reality of what I had seen, doubting my own senses. Should I report this encounter to my colleagues, or would they claim I was overly fatigued? The fear of being labeled insane gnawed at me, but deep down, I knew I couldn't keep this experience to myself. After gathering my scattered thoughts, I hurried back into the laboratory, my heart still pounding in my chest. With trembling hands, I wrote down every detail of the encounter in my journal, trying to capture the essence of the creature's presence. It was my attempt to preserve the authenticity of the experience, to ensure that this encounter would not fade away like a mere dream. In the following days, I confided in a trusted colleague about what I had witnessed. Although they listened with an open mind, skepticism shadowed their expression. To this day, I cannot help but wonder about the creature's true nature and purpose. Was it an undiscovered species, a genetic mutation, or something far more extraordinary? The encounter left me with more questions than answers, a lingering sense of awe, and an undeniable awareness that there are mysteries in this world that defy conventional understanding. That night changed me. It shattered the boundaries of my perception and made me acutely aware of the vast unknown that lies just beyond our grasp. It taught me humility, reminding me that the world is far more complex and extraordinary than we can ever fathom. And though the encounter left me with an unshakable sense of unease, it also ignited within me a deep curiosity to explore the boundaries of our existence, to seek answers to the enigmas that dwell in the shadows of our reality. I'm not certain about the whole skinwalker thing or where they live or what they look like, but I was told to post my story here in hopes of some answers. See, I live in the UK, and my friend's uncle owns quite a large bit of land. We go hunting there quite often. We hunt pheasant, rabbit, squirrel, and duck, so there's no need for any high-powered guns, and we usually just take air rifles. Obviously, rabbits are nocturnal, so most of the time we would set up camp and go off with flashlights up at the top of the land where there was less woodland and a higher chance of finding them. But tonight, I suggested we go down to the woodland area, as I had seen a few rabbit dens near the creek. My friend was very against going down there and made it clear he wanted to stay up in the fields. I told him, fine, I'll just go off on my own and see what I can catch. So I go down to the creek, which, by the way, is a very large dip in the ground with a stream running at the bottom. I remember that as I neared the creek, I heard splashing and kicking in the stream, which I thought might have been the rabbits. But when I looked through my scope, there was too much vegetation, and I needed to get closer. As I started to descend the very steep side down to the creek, I noticed a white glint in the corner of my eye. When I looked, I noticed that it was bone. I thought it was quite cool and wanted to get a closer look. But upon closer inspection, I could see quite clearly that it was a fully grown female deer, or what was left of it. This was strange because, as I said before, we live in the UK, and we don't have a lot of predators down south where I was. So I thought of all the things it could have been. My friend's uncle? No, he doesn't have a deer hunting license. A very large fox? No, I doubt a fox could kill a deer this size. In the end, I came to the conclusion that it had fallen down the creek and broken its leg and had been left to die. I started walking back up the side of the creek when I heard some rustling on the other side. I scoped in to take a closer look. Then whatever I was looking at sprinted away, making me jump. But this wasn't any normal sprint. This was a bipedal, two-legged charge. I could see leaves rustling behind it as it ran, and it was taller than me. This thing was huge, and I was defenseless with just a mere air rifle. But the sheer force with which this thing ran was enough to make me petrified. So, I hurriedly walked back from the creek to the fields to tell my friend what had happened. I asked if it was him doing it to scare me, and he swore on his life that he had been up here the whole time. After no luck catching rabbits, we went back to the tent to get some rest, but I could not sleep thinking about what had happened or what could have happened. Just then, my heart dropped. The loudest, blood-curdling scream made me jump out of my skin. My friend woke up in a fluster, asking what on earth was that. It was then silent for a few moments, and then it happened again. The scream rattled on for almost 30 seconds, and my friend suggested it was a fox, but we had heard foxes scream many times before. A fox can even sound like a woman screaming. This was not it. This was akin to a grown man's scream, but we're out here in the middle of nowhere. Nobody would be on a walk at this hour. Rest assured, we did not sleep that night.